The sun was just starting to rise over the quiet countryside, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the earthy scent of the fields. In the middle of this peaceful scene, a farmer was already hard at work. He had been up before dawn, tending to his crops like he did every day. The rows of green plants stretched across the land, swaying gently in the light morning breeze. His hands were calloused from years of working the soil, but he moved with care as if each plant mattered deeply to him. Farming wasn't easy, but it was honest work, and he had always believed in taking pride in it. As he bent over, pulling weeds from around the young plants, he heard something that did not belong in this quiet morning, a loud screeching noise that made his heart skip a beat. It was sharp, sudden, and completely different from the soft rustle of leaves or the distant crowing of roosters. Before he could think twice, there was a deafening crash. Something heavy had slammed into the earth, sending a spray of dirt and dust into the air. He froze for a moment, heart pounding. He knew that sound meant trouble, and trouble was nearby. Without hesitating, he dropped his tools and ran toward the road. As he approached, the scene that met his eyes made him stop for a second. A car had flipped over and landed in a ditch beside the road. Smoke was rising from its hood, curling into the morning air. The vehicle was badly damaged, its windows shattered, and it was clear that someone inside was hurt. The farmer's stomach twisted at the sight, but he didn't let fear stop him. He had seen accidents before, and he knew that if he waited for help, it might be too late. He ran closer and saw a man inside the car, groaning in pain. The man was trapped by the seatbelt, and his legs seemed twisted at an unnatural angle. Panic was starting to show in his eyes, but the farmer stayed calm. He knew that panic could make the situation worse. He looked around quickly and saw a sturdy branch lying nearby. Carefully, he used it to pry open the car door as best he could. The car groaned under the pressure, but it didn't give way easily. Still, he didn't stop. Every second counted, and he had to get the man out before the smoke turned into something dangerous. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door gave way, just enough for him to reach inside. He grasped the man firmly, speaking in a calm voice. "It's okay, I've got you. You're going to be fine. Just hang on a little longer." The man tried to respond but could only manage a weak groan. The farmer didn't let it discourage him. He gently lifted the man from the seat, careful not to worsen his injuries. His own strength, built from years of farming, made the task possible, but it wasn't easy. Every movement had to be deliberate, slow, and steady. Once the man was out of the car, the farmer laid him on the grass beside the road. He could see that the man was in pain, his face pale and his clothes torn from the accident. The farmer's mind raced. He needed help fast. Pulling out his phone, he dialed the local emergency number. The phone line crackled, but he stayed on the call, describing the situation with as much detail as he could. He gave his location, explained the injuries, and stayed on the line until he was sure help was coming. While waiting, he stayed by the man's side. He held the man's hand, offering words of comfort, even though he didn't know him at all. "It's going to be okay. The ambulance is on the way. Just stay with me." The man's breathing was shallow, but he seemed to find some strength in the farmer's calm presence. Other drivers slowed as they passed by, some stopping to ask if they could help, but the farmer politely waved them off. He had everything under control, or at least he hoped he did. His focus never wavered from the man lying before him. As minutes dragged on, the man finally managed to whisper something. "Thank you, I don't know how to repay you." His voice was weak, almost a whisper lost in the wind. The farmer smiled gently, brushing the hair from the man's forehead. "There's nothing to repay," he said simply. "I just did what anyone should do. You were in trouble and I helped. That's enough." His words were sincere, not rehearsed, not meant to impress anyone. He didn't think about money, fame, or recognition. All that mattered was keeping this person alive. The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance, and relief washed over the farmer. Soon paramedics arrived, rushing to the scene with their equipment. They quickly assessed the man, carefully lifting him onto a stretcher. The farmer stepped back, letting the professionals take over, but he didn't leave immediately. He answered their questions, giving a detailed account of what had happened, all the while keeping an eye on the man. Once the man was safely loaded into the ambulance, the farmer finally allowed himself a deep breath. His chest ached from the effort, but he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. He had done what needed to be done. The man was alive, and that was all that mattered. There was no applause, no crowd of people cheering. Just the sound of the ambulance fading down the road and the soft rustling of the fields in the breeze. The farmer returned to his field, picking up his tools as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The sun was higher now, warming the earth and making the green plants shimmer. He resumed his work, methodically pulling weeds, checking the soil, and tending to the plants with the same care he always had. To him, life went on as it always did. Helping someone in need was just part of being human, part of living a life with honesty and compassion. Later that day, the farmer would hear the whispers in the small town. People would talk about a terrible car accident on the country road. Some would say a man had been hurt badly, but miraculously survived. They would mention that a local farmer had rushed to help, saving the man's life before the ambulance even arrived. Yet the farmer himself would shrug off any praise. He would not seek attention. He would not think about the man's wealth, his background, or the kind of life he lived. All that mattered to him was that he had done the right thing. In the quiet of the evening, as he sat on the porch of his small home, watching the sun sink behind the hills, he felt a deep sense of peace. The day had been challenging, exhausting even, but it had also reminded him of something important. Courage didn't mean never feeling fear. It meant acting even when fear was there. Kindness didn't require wealth or status. It required only a willing heart. And sometimes the simplest acts, helping someone when no one else will, were the most meaningful of all. As night fell, the farmer went to bed, tired but content. He didn't know who the man he had saved truly was. He didn't know that the man was someone extraordinary, someone wealthy and powerful. That detail didn't matter to him. The farmer slept with the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had acted with honesty and humanity, guided only by the principle of doing what was right and not by what could be gained. Tomorrow, he would rise with the sun again, tend his fields, care for his family, and live his life as he always had. But somewhere far away, a man whose life had been changed forever would think of him, grateful beyond words, and wonder how someone so ordinary could have made such an extraordinary difference. And in that quiet, unseen way, the farmer's courage had already started to ripple outward, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. The next morning, the farmer woke up to the familiar sound of roosters crowing and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. His body ached from the previous day's effort, but he didn't mind. He knew that the work on the farm never truly ended, and that was fine with him. He had always believed that hard work was its own reward. As he stepped outside, the morning sunlight cast a golden glow across his fields. Everything looked peaceful, just as it always did. Yet, even in that calm, a part of his mind lingered on the man from the car accident. He wondered if the man was truly going to be all right. By mid-morning, the farmer noticed a few neighbors walking by. Their faces were a mix of curiosity and admiration. Some hesitated, unsure if they should approach, while others simply waved. One neighbor finally spoke up, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. "Did you hear about that car crash yesterday? The man you helped? He's not just anyone. People are saying he's one of the richest men in the country." The farmer blinked, momentarily confused. He had never paid attention to such matters, nor had he cared about wealth or fame. He had simply helped a man in need because it was the right thing to do. "I don't know anything about that," he said quietly, trying to sound modest. "I just saw someone who needed help and I helped him. That's all." But word travels fast in small towns, and soon more people were talking. Some whispered about how brave he was, while others tried to imagine what it must have been like to save a billionaire without even knowing it. The farmer listened quietly, offering small smiles, but he didn't let the gossip change him. For him, life was simple. He had his farm, his family, and the satisfaction of a job well done. Recognition was not part of the equation. Meanwhile, far away in a city hospital, the man from the accident was waking up. The crash had left him shaken and in pain, but the first thing he remembered was the farmer's face, the calm determination in his eyes, the way he had gently lifted him from the wreckage, and the steady voice reassuring him. It all stayed with him. In a life filled with meetings, decisions, and endless responsibilities, he realized how rare it was to encounter someone so selfless, someone who didn't ask for anything in return. The man's assistants and staff tried to figure out how to properly thank the farmer, but they knew they had to tread carefully. They arranged for messages to be sent to the small town, requesting to meet the man who had saved his life. They didn't want the farmer to feel pressured or uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the man himself insisted on knowing every detail about the farmer. He wanted to understand his story, his life, and the reasons behind his courage. Back on the farm, the farmer continued his work. He rose before dawn every day, feeding the animals, tending to crops, and repairing fences. Life was not easy, but it was honest and fulfilling. The accident was slowly becoming a distant memory, but a quiet awareness lingered that something had shifted in the world around him. People looked at him differently, offering smiles and nods of respect. Children waved as he passed by, and even strangers who had only heard about the incident would stop to shake his hand. Still, he remained grounded, refusing to let attention change who he was. A few days later, a car arrived at the farmer's property. It was sleek, unlike anything he had seen before, and the driver stepped out with an envelope in his hand. The farmer watched carefully, unsure what to expect. The driver introduced himself as someone sent by the man he had helped, delivering a letter of gratitude and an invitation to meet. The farmer accepted politely, still unaware of the true significance of the situation. He didn't think about the money or status that might be involved. To him, it was simply a chance to hear from the man he had helped, nothing more. When he arrived at the hospital, he was struck by the stark contrast to his simple life. The building was enormous, filled with people bustling back and forth, talking on phones and carrying important-looking documents. He felt out of place for a moment, but the man he had saved immediately made him feel welcome. Sitting up in a hospital bed, the man smiled warmly, his face still showing traces of the accident, but his eyes full of gratitude. "I wanted to meet you in person," he said softly. "You saved my life. I can never thank you enough." The farmer shook his head, trying to deflect the praise. "I did what anyone should do," he replied. "If it had been me in that car, I would hope someone would do the same for me. That's all there is to it." His voice was calm, sincere, and free of arrogance. But the man insisted. He explained that in his world, where wealth and influence often determined every action, it was rare to meet someone who acted purely out of compassion. He asked questions about the farmer's life, his family, and the challenges he faced every day. The farmer spoke honestly, sharing the simple joys of tending the land, raising his animals, and living a life guided by integrity. He didn't exaggerate, he didn't try to impress, and he didn't speak about wealth or ambition. Over the course of the visit, the man realized that the farmer's humility and courage were far more valuable than anything money could buy. He wanted to express his gratitude in a meaningful way, but knew that it had to respect the farmer's values. He decided to offer help, not as a gift with conditions, but as support that could genuinely make life easier for the farmer and his family. He promised educational opportunities for the children, resources to improve the farm, and even access to new technologies that could help him work more efficiently. The farmer was surprised and overwhelmed. He had never imagined such generosity, but he accepted politely, emphasizing that he would continue to live his life as he always had. "I appreciate the offer," he said, "but my life is simple. I want to keep it that way. Your kindness is already more than enough." His words reflected his character, grateful yet grounded, humble yet dignified. In the days that followed, the farmer noticed small changes around his property. New equipment arrived, the animals were healthier thanks to better care, and the crops began to flourish even more than before. But the farmer remained the same in spirit. He still rose before dawn, still worked tirelessly in the fields, and still found joy in the simplest moments. Watching the sun rise, hearing the birds sing, and feeling the earth in his hands. Nothing about his nature had changed. Meanwhile, the man he had saved became a quiet presence in the farmer's life. He visited occasionally, always respectful of boundaries, always emphasizing friendship and gratitude rather than power or influence. They spoke often, sharing stories, laughing about small things, and forming a bond built on respect and humanity. The billionaire's world was busy and loud, filled with responsibility and expectation, while the farmer's life was steady and calm. Yet somehow they complemented each other, each learning lessons from the other's experiences. As weeks turned into months, the farmer's story spread beyond the small town. People admired him not because he had saved a wealthy man, but because he had acted with courage, humility, and kindness. They saw that true heroism was not about fame or fortune. It was about selfless action, and the willingness to help without expecting anything in return. Children in the town looked up to him, inspired by his example, while adults quietly reflected on their own lives and the ways they could be kinder and braver. One evening, after a long day in the fields, the farmer sat on his porch with a cup of tea. The sky was painted in deep purples and soft golds, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of freshly turned soil. He thought about the accident, the man, and the chain of events that had followed. He realized that life could change in an instant, that small acts of courage could have rippling effects far beyond what anyone could imagine. Yet he also understood that life's true value lay not in wealth, recognition, or status, but in the choices people made every day. The choice to act with integrity, to show compassion, and to live with honesty. In that quiet moment, the farmer smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He had done what was right without thinking of reward, and that simple truth had set in motion something extraordinary. His life remained humble and grounded, yet richer in experience, connection, and meaning than ever before. And somewhere, far from the quiet fields he called home, the man whose life he had saved would never forget the courage and kindness of a simple farmer who had acted without hesitation, guided only by the goodness of his heart. The farmer knew that tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, and more moments that required patience and strength, but he also knew that he could face them with the same calm courage that had defined him for so many years. In helping someone in need, he had discovered something timeless, that true heroism is quiet, unassuming, and lives in the hearts of ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things. And so, life went on. The farmer continued his daily routine, humble and grounded, yet touched forever by an event that had reminded him of the power of kindness, courage, and the unspoken bonds that connect humanity across all walks of life. Each sunrise brought opportunity, each day carried meaning, and each simple act of compassion left a mark far greater than anyone could ever measure. Days passed quietly on the farm, but the farmer could feel that something had subtly shifted in the air. Life went on as usual. He woke up before dawn, fed the animals, tended to his crops, and repaired fences, but the accident and its aftermath lingered in his thoughts. People in the town had begun speaking of him in whispers of admiration. While he didn't seek attention, it was impossible to ignore the curiosity in their eyes, the small nods of respect, and the occasional smiles of gratitude. It was as if the world had taken notice of something the farmer had always known about himself, that courage and kindness were more important than wealth or fame. The man from the car accident had recovered in the hospital, and though his physical wounds were healing, the emotional impact of the farmer's actions had left a deeper mark. He often thought back to the moment when the farmer had pulled him from the wreckage, his calm voice reassuring him, his hands steady and strong. In his life he had dealt with emergencies of all kinds, but never had someone stepped forward with such selfless courage, without hesitation, and without expecting anything in return. The realization filled him with a mixture of awe and humility. One morning, the man's assistants carefully arranged for him to write a letter to the farmer. They debated how to phrase it, how to convey gratitude properly, but the man insisted on simplicity. He wanted the letter to reflect sincerity, not grandeur or formality. When the letter arrived, the farmer was initially surprised. It was delivered by hand, wrapped neatly, and inside were words that spoke from the heart: thanks, appreciation, and an invitation to meet again if he wished. The farmer read it quietly, a soft smile forming on his face. He didn't feel proud or special. He simply felt that the kindness between people was something worth cherishing. Curiosity stirred in the farmer's mind. Though he had never cared about money, status, or recognition, he wondered about the man he had saved. Who was he? What had brought him to this small, quiet road in the countryside? The thought was fleeting, however. He quickly reminded himself that such questions mattered less than the fact that a life had been preserved. Still, the invitation lingered in his mind like a quiet echo, urging him to see what had come from the simple act of helping another person. When he finally arrived at the hospital, he was struck by the contrast between his simple life and the world he stepped into. The building was massive, polished, and bustling with people who moved quickly, speaking in hurried tones and checking glowing screens. The farmer felt out of place for a moment, his hands roughened by years of work, his clothes simple and worn. Yet as he entered the room, the man smiled warmly, instantly bridging the gap between their worlds. The warmth in his eyes reminded the farmer that human connection was not measured by wealth or appearances. It was measured by sincerity and care. The man thanked him again, his voice steady despite the lingering weakness from the accident. "I wanted to meet you in person," he said. "I don't know if words can ever express my gratitude. You saved my life." The farmer shook his head modestly. "I did what anyone should do. I saw someone in trouble and I helped. That's all." His words were simple, yet they carried weight, reflecting a philosophy of life grounded in compassion and honesty. As they spoke, the man asked about the farmer's life, genuinely interested in the routines, challenges, and joys that made up his days. The farmer spoke freely, describing the farm, the animals, the crops, and the satisfaction of honest work. He spoke about early mornings, long days, and the pride of seeing the fruits of his labor. There was no exaggeration, no desire to impress, just the truth of a life lived with dedication and integrity. The conversation shifted gently to the future. The man explained that he wanted to offer support, not as a favor or charity, but as a way to ensure the farmer and his family could continue to thrive. He spoke of opportunities for the farmer's children to receive education, resources to improve the farm, and tools that could make the daily work more manageable. The farmer listened carefully, absorbing the offer but remaining grounded. He accepted politely, emphasizing that his life's simplicity was part of its value. "I appreciate your kindness," he said, "but I want to keep my life the way it is. The help you offer is already more than enough." Over the next few weeks, subtle changes began to take place on the farm. New tools arrived, sturdy and efficient, making the farmer's work easier and more productive. He received seeds for crops that would yield better harvests, along with guidance on ways to care for them. Veterinary supplies arrived for the animals, ensuring they remained healthy and strong. Despite these improvements, the farmer continued his routine as before, rising early, tending the land, and caring for the animals. His heart remained grounded, untouched by any desire for wealth or recognition. In the town, the story of the farmer and the man he had saved continued to circulate. People admired him not because of the man's wealth, but because of the courage, humility, and kindness he had shown. Children began to look up to him as an example of how to live with integrity, and adults quietly reflected on the choices in their own lives. The farmer became a quiet inspiration, a reminder that heroism was not measured in fame or fortune, but in the willingness to act selflessly in moments that mattered most. As the farmer worked the fields one afternoon, he thought about the ripple effect of a single act of kindness. He realized that helping someone in need could lead to changes far beyond what he could see. The man he had saved had already begun to share the story with others, and the influence of that small, courageous act was spreading, inspiring people to be better, kinder, and braver. Yet the farmer himself remained unchanged, continuing to live by the simple principles that had guided him his entire life. Occasionally, the man visited the farm, always arriving without grandeur or expectation. He would walk quietly among the fields, observing the crops, admiring the work, and engaging in conversations that felt natural and sincere. They shared stories about life, challenges, and the quiet victories that often go unnoticed. The farmer found these visits meaningful, not because of the man's status, but because they offered connection, friendship, and mutual respect. In a world often dominated by wealth and appearances, their bond reminded them both that true value lay in character, kindness, and courage. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of gold and purple, the farmer paused to reflect on the events that had unfolded over the past weeks. Life on the farm was still challenging, but the experience had added a layer of depth and perspective. He understood that even the simplest actions, offering a helping hand, showing compassion in a moment of crisis, could transform lives in ways that could never be measured by money or status. That realization brought him quiet satisfaction and a sense of purpose that went beyond the day-to-day routines of farm life. He thought about the man he had saved, imagining the world he came from, a world of wealth, power, and influence, and recognized how extraordinary it was to bridge the gap between two very different lives. The farmer had acted without thought for reward, and in doing so he had created a connection that transcended social barriers, wealth, and expectation. It was a reminder that humanity could be found in the simplest acts of courage and kindness, and that the impact of those acts often reached far beyond the moment itself. In the weeks that followed, the farmer continued his work with the same dedication and humility as always. Yet there was a quiet pride in his heart, a sense of fulfillment that came from knowing he had done something meaningful, something that had changed the course of another person's life. The crops flourished, the animals thrived, and his family's life became more secure, not because of fame or recognition, but because of the genuine connections and support that had grown from a single selfless act. As night fell on the farmer would often sit on his porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the vast open sky. He thought about the accident, the man he had helped, and the subtle ways life had shifted as a result. There was gratitude in his heart, not for the attention or rewards he had received, but for the reminder that courage, kindness, and integrity were powerful forces in their own right. They were forces that could change lives, build bonds, and inspire others to act with compassion, even in moments that seemed small or insignificant. Through it all, the farmer remained grounded. He understood that true heroism was quiet, humble, and often unseen. It wasn't about recognition, wealth, or status. It was about doing what was right when it mattered most. And in that understanding, he found a deep and lasting sense of peace, knowing that his actions had not only saved a life, but had also sown seeds of inspiration that would continue to grow, quietly and steadily in the hearts of others. And so, life on the farm continued. Days passed with the familiar rhythm of work, care, and quiet reflection. Yet beneath the surface, a subtle transformation had taken place. The farmer had discovered that a single act of courage could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that could never be fully measured. And the man he had saved, once a stranger, had become a symbol of the extraordinary connections that could arise when one acted with kindness, integrity, and selflessness. In the end, the farmer realized that life's true richness was not found in wealth or fame, but in the strength of character, the depth of compassion, and the courage to do what was right no matter the cost. And as he looked out over the fields, the animals grazing peacefully, and the golden sunset painting the sky, he knew that he had lived that truth fully, and that was worth more than anything else in the world. Life on the farm carried on in its familiar rhythm, yet the farmer began to notice subtle changes. Though he continued to rise with the sun, tend to the fields, and care for his animals, there was a quiet difference in the way people looked at him. The townsfolk spoke of him in hushed admiration, sharing the story of how he had saved a man from a terrible accident. Children would wave excitedly when he walked past, and even strangers who heard the tale seemed to carry a newfound respect for him. But the farmer remained humble, never seeking recognition. He was simply doing what he had always done, living honestly and helping when needed. Meanwhile, the man he had saved was recovering steadily in the hospital. Though his body was healing, the memory of the farmer's courage stayed with him. He thought often of the way the farmer had lifted him from the wreckage, his calm voice and steady hands giving reassurance when everything seemed chaotic and frightening. In a world where most people acted out of self-interest or sought recognition, encountering someone so selfless left a profound impact. It was a reminder that true generosity came from the heart and could appear in the most unexpected places. One morning, the man decided it was time to meet the farmer again, this time not in the hospital but at his own home. He wanted to offer his gratitude in person, beyond letters or brief visits. When the farmer arrived, he was struck by the scale of the man's home and the life of comfort that awaited there. It was a world far removed from the quiet simplicity of his own farm. For a moment he felt a wave of unease, unsure how to act in such surroundings. But the man greeted him warmly, his smile genuine, and all tension faded. It became clear that he wasn't interested in showing off wealth or status. He wanted simply to honor the person who had saved his life. The conversation began with stories and laughter, each man learning about the other's life. The billionaire shared glimpses of a world filled with travel, responsibility, and decisions that affected thousands of lives. The farmer, in turn, described the small joys of farm life, the satisfaction of tending crops, the quiet companionship of animals, and the simple pleasure of seeing a hard day's work come to fruition. Though the contrasts were stark, there was a shared respect between them, a recognition that courage, humility, and integrity transcended wealth, status, or circumstance. As the conversation deepened, the man explained that he wanted to express his gratitude in a meaningful way. He offered resources to improve the farmer's land, opportunities for his children to receive education, and support that could make life on the farm easier and more productive. The farmer listened carefully, touched by the generosity, yet he remained grounded in his principles. "Your kindness is more than I could ask for," he said gently, "but my life is simple, and I wish to keep it that way. I will use what you offer wisely, but I will not let it change who I am." The man nodded, understanding completely. He realized that the farmer's humility was part of what made him extraordinary. Wealth or power could not create courage, honesty, or compassion. These were qualities the farmer had shown naturally, in a moment of need. And in recognizing that, the billionaire felt a profound sense of gratitude and admiration, not just for the act of saving his life, but for the character of the person who had done it. Over the following weeks, small improvements began to take shape on the farm. New equipment arrived, strong, reliable tools that made the work more efficient. Seeds for high-quality crops were provided, along with guidance on how to cultivate them effectively. Veterinary care supplies arrived for the animals, ensuring they remained healthy and strong. These changes allowed the farmer to focus on the quality of his work rather than the limitations of his tools, but he approached the upgrades with the same care and dedication he had always shown. Despite these improvements, the farmer's routine remained unchanged. He rose with the sun, worked the fields, tended the animals, and cared for his family. The essence of his life, the simplicity, the connection to the land, the satisfaction of honest work, remained intact. The support he received did not alter his character or principles. Instead, it allowed him to enhance the life he already valued, making his work more fruitful and his family's future more secure. The town continued to buzz with admiration and curiosity. People spoke of the farmer not because of the man's wealth, but because of the bravery, humility, and kindness he had shown. Children began to see him as a hero, not because he was famous, but because he had acted with integrity and courage. Adults quietly reflected on their own lives, inspired to act with more kindness, to value humility, and to consider the impact of their choices on others. The farmer had become an unspoken symbol of quiet heroism, proving that true greatness came not from recognition or material wealth, but from character and action. Occasionally, the billionaire visited the farm. He arrived without fanfare, respecting the farmer's privacy and simplicity. Together, they walked through the fields, discussed the crops, and shared stories about life, work, and family. These visits were not about wealth or status. They were about human connection, shared understanding, and mutual respect. The farmer appreciated the companionship and insight, while the man valued the honesty and perspective that the farmer provided. Each visit strengthened a bond built on gratitude, humility, and sincerity. One afternoon, after a long day in the fields, the farmer paused to rest on the porch, watching the sun cast golden light over the land. He reflected on how life had changed subtly since the accident. The man he had saved had become a part of his life in a way that was meaningful, yet unobtrusive. He realized that courage, kindness, and integrity could create connections that were powerful and lasting, far beyond what anyone could predict. Even a single act carried out without expectation could set in motion a chain of events that touched lives in profound ways. He also thought about his own family and the future of the farm. With the support he had received, his children could pursue education and opportunities that he had never imagined. The land could flourish, producing more than he could have achieved alone. Yet he felt no pride in wealth or material gain. His pride came from the knowledge that he had acted rightly, guided by principles of honesty and compassion. The help he received was a tool to enhance what he had already built, not a means to change the essence of who he was. The farmer often shared simple lessons with his children. He taught them the value of hard work, the importance of integrity, and the power of kindness. He explained that true courage was not about grand gestures or recognition, but about acting rightly when it mattered most. By showing them these principles, he hoped to ensure that the next generation would carry forward the values that had guided him, creating a legacy built on character rather than wealth or status. As the weeks turned into months, the farm thrived in ways that seemed almost effortless. Crops grew strong and healthy, animals were well cared for, and the farmer's family felt secure and supported. Yet, the farmer remained the same in spirit, humble and grounded, valuing the simple joys of life and the satisfaction of honest work. He continued to rise with the sun, tend to the land, and care for his family with the same dedication as always. The man he had saved continued to visit, deepening their friendship. Each visit was a reminder that wealth and status did not define a person, nor did they determine the value of human connection. True value came from kindness, courage, and the willingness to act with integrity. The billionaire admired the farmer not for his possessions, but for the strength of his character and the quiet heroism he displayed in an ordinary life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, the farmer sat on his porch and reflected on the journey that had begun with a sudden crash on a quiet country road. He thought about the man he had saved, the subtle changes in his life, and the ripple effect that one act of courage had created. He realized that life's true richness lay not in wealth or recognition, but in the strength of character, the depth of compassion, and the courage to do what was right. He understood that heroism could be quiet and unassuming. It could exist in ordinary people who chose to act with integrity and kindness when it mattered most. And though the farmer's life remained simple, the impact of his actions reached far beyond the farm, touching lives in ways he could never fully measure. It was a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage and compassion could create profound and lasting change. And so, life continued on the farm, steady and fulfilling. The farmer worked the land, cared for his family, and maintained the routines that had always defined him. Yet beneath the surface, a transformation had taken place. The man he had saved had become a friend, the farm had become stronger, and the community had learned the power of selfless action. Through it all, the farmer remained humble, grounded, and guided by the simple principles that had always defined him: courage, kindness, and integrity. In the quiet of the evening, as stars began to appear in the vast open sky, the farmer felt a deep sense of peace. He had acted rightly, helped another human being, and shown that true heroism and greatness are measured not by wealth or fame, but by the courage to act selflessly and the integrity to live honestly. And that, he realized, was the most meaningful legacy a person could leave behind. The days on the farm flowed with their usual rhythm, yet a sense of calm fulfillment settled over the farmer that he had never experienced before. He rose each morning with the sun, as always, but now he carried with him a quiet awareness that his small act of courage had created ripples far beyond the fields and hills he knew so well. Life continued with its familiar tasks, feeding animals, checking crops, repairing fences, but each moment seemed more meaningful. The farmer noticed the simple beauty of his surroundings more clearly: the soft rustle of leaves in the morning breeze, the golden shimmer of sunlight across the fields, and the gentle cooing of birds as they welcomed the day. It was as if the world had become both larger and more intimate at the same time, filled with possibilities and connections he had never fully appreciated before. The man he had saved had recovered fully, and his gratitude had only grown stronger over time. Though he had the resources to live a life of luxury, he often thought about the farmer and the simplicity, courage, and integrity that defined him. In a world where wealth often created distance between people, the farmer's humility reminded him that true value lay in actions, not possessions. The man began to visit more often, not to show power or status, but to share friendship, stories, and lessons about life. These visits became moments of learning, understanding, and mutual respect, bridging two very different worlds with kindness and sincerity. When the billionaire arrived at the farm one afternoon, he was greeted with the usual warmth. The farmer smiled, wiping his hands on a cloth after tending the animals. "It's good to see you," he said simply, his words free of any pretense. The man returned the